I guess a better question is, were there any questions from the reading from last night? Before we get started.
One of the links didn't work. I forgot which one that was. I think it was from the CSS. What you guys recommended, CSS?
Okay. Favorite CSS link.
Yeah, that one did work.
Really? Cool. I'll check that out. Because ironically, it worked for me not 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
So we're actually going to go through that link today too. So awesome. But the reading made sense. Felt good.
In an I'd like to get my hands dirty kind of way, yes.
Good. So, because what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be doing a quick kind of like highlighting the key points from last night's reading. And then we're going to dive in and we're going to create something together. So, that being said, welcome to CSS. So, what is CSS? Where's my mouse? There you go. Does anyone know what CSS stands for?
Cascading style sheets. Yep.
Awesome, yeah. So what does that mean, Joe?
It's like a formatting. I don't know.
so quick off the draw. So you'll take this one out.
Yeah, it helps you shape the look and feel of your page,
Okay.
of your website.
Good. Dante, do you want to add anything to that? I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff that can override your HTML styling with that. Like if you wanted to change the font or the color of your text or
So formatting and styling your HTML page and overriding your styles.
yeah.
Those are really kind of good, definite kind of working group here, and really the key words to kind of pluck out of that and the key ideas: formatting and styling. Whether we're adding, overriding, changing. We saw yesterday how we changed it from just blank text to a p tag. Now it looks different, right? It has an extra border, it has a different font, it looks different. Well, but not all p tags are the same, right? Sometimes they need to be styled one way, they need to have certain colors, certain margins, certain properties. This brings us to the idea that CSS is strictly for formatting and styling. In HTML, what we learned yesterday, should only be content. So you remember how yesterday we learned about tables real fast? Like, here's tables, and here's what's going on. Well, for the longest time, before we had a lot of modern CSS tools, we would use tables for the layout, which got the job done. Everyone had big desktops back in like the 90s and 2000s. But if we all look at what's on our tables right now, we have a plethora of computer screens from 10-inch, 13-inch, 15-inch, 17-inch, 7-inch, as well as tablets, right? As well as phones, as well as smartwatches, as well as smart fridges, smart microwaves, smart cars, smart everything. Everything has a screen for some reason. But what that means is that that structure, that kind of was too rigid. It's too rigid because our content and our formatting was one. So CSS allows us to kind of take that idea and say, hey, HTML, you just worry about what's the content, what are we actually trying to convey. And CSS is, hey, here's the stuff, here's how it looks. So that means, in theory, in a perfect world, we could have one HTML page and then a whole bunch of CSS pages. We can actually restyle our site to make it look completely different only by switching out the CSS page. And that's it. That's kind of the blue sky dream. That doesn't happen in reality, but
So, one CSS page though can cover the styling for like a tablet or so you don't need like separate.
correct. Yeah. We'll get to a strategy on Thursday called media queries that allows us to actually do that dynamic designs. But we got to get up there first. So yeah, it's pretty much CSS, cascading style sheets, formatting, HTML, how our HTML looks. I like to equate it how HTML is your skeleton, CSS is your clothes, what you look like on the outside, it's your appearance. So, what does that mean for us? Well, a lot of keywords. There's 3 pretty much big keywords that we have to care about. Properties, declaration, and selectors. These should sound familiar. They shouldn't be too crazy. Just to run through them, I know you all can read, but just to run through them, a property is an identifier for something that we want to change. This is going to be like your background color, your borders, your margin, how it's displayed on the page. this is what we're actually looking to target and style. A declaration is a group of properties that creates a rule of some sort. So it says, hey, here's a rule that says everything that's we have background color green, border is red, the text is italics, and it is a font size 3 rems, so it's pretty big. That'd be like a big header for a Christmas page or something like that. But that would be one big giant declaration. The last part of that is the actual selector. So it's what's getting that giant gaudy Christmas border. What is getting it? Is it all P tags? Is it just things that have a class name of header? Is it one specific thing that has an ID? How are we feeling so far?
Are we
Good.
okay? So you're going to use these keywords from now on?
Yeah, these are kind of just things that we're going to be saying,
Okay.
just to not like, you don't have to memorize these, but just be like, oh, he said, we talked about a property, well, it's a property, that's a property. These would become part of like what we're saying and stuff like that. Generally, how I approach software is I don't get too hung up on the actual thing that's in bold, the actual word itself. I'm more concerned with understanding what's on the other side. If I can go, hey, I know there's this thing in CSS that I can change the background color. I don't know what it's called. I think it's a property, maybe a value, maybe a declaration, maybe something like that. But I know that concept. So don't try to get too hung up on like learning the alphabet soup. That will come with time. Focus more on the concepts.
Because I see like class equals, which is sort of goes into, but that's HTML. But you
Correct.
define the class and then
Over in
is
CSS.
that, yeah. So is that a declaration or is that all of it?
So yeah, it's kind of all of that.
Okay.
So the class that you're talking about is actually the whole entire like CSS rule or class. It has a selector, so what gets it? It has what properties we have, what
Yeah.
styles does it have, and what the values each property have.
Okay.
So here's our first real simple CSS. We notice that we have some properties. This one is color. That's actually text color, just so we're all aware. Color is a really good example because it's easy and simple. We all know what color is. We have a declaration, very simple declaration. Each one has one property in it. And we have some very simple selectors. The first selector on line 2 is a P, and that's it. For a selector that has no other punctuation around it, that's just a symbol like that, that says, hey, all P tags on my HTML page will get this style. So yesterday we made a P tag, right?
Mhm.
It's like, hey, here's my story, not my hobby, and blah, 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 blah. If we would apply this style sheet to it, now the text color is now red. If we had a second paragraph, that second paragraph's text will also be red. So they're very wide sweeping, very like everything does this all the time. So very general. A more specific one is to use class, and this is what Joe was kind of alluding to earlier. Is that in HTML, we can go, hey, class name equals something. We can kind of give it a bit more meaning, a bit more semantic, and saying, hey, everything that has the selected class, dot selected, gets to be this color blue. So as we dive into this, we'll kind of learn something called specificity, which is a really fun and hard word to say. But it's saying, hey, if we have things that target the same element, which one wins? So just kind of think of this in the back of your head. If we had a P tag with the class of dots of selected on it, which one would win?
So selected.
Yeah, it would, because it's more specific. So generally what you'll see very few tag selectors because they're kind of broad and like a big sledgehammer. Like, I'm going to do everything. But you'll find a lot of times we're doing more specific selectors. So like class selectors or maybe like HTML structure selectors or something along those lines.
So the first one, P, is called a tag selector,
Yes,
and the other one's class selector.
correct.
That's what it is. So probably.
Question?
Yeah.
The order matter.
Like if the selected was on top of the paragraph?
Specificity precedes order. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Proceeds.
So just to walk through some common selectors. These are kind of the basic selectors that you'll be using for the majority of your career. At least these are the types that I use. The first one we talked about selects all p tags. Second one we talked about dot selected does all class elements. The third one is an ID selector. You can throw an ID attribute on an HTML element, and that'll give it a unique identifier on the page. So it has to be unique. So there's only one top choice on my entire page. So I can target whatever element has that ID and give it that CSS class, and give it those CSS rules.
And you put that ID inside the tag that you're wrapping it in,
Correct.
inside the HTML.
Correct. You'll find that HTML and CSS really lean on each other hard. Even though we say they're separate, two different things, it's all fine and dandy. But really, you can't do one without the other. On line 17, can you all see that in the back? It's a header space H1. This is now getting to a bit more of a complex selector. This says, hey, give me all H1s that are contained within header. So header is a type of tag. H1 is a type of tag. Now we've kind of scoped down our rules a little bit to say, hey, only target H1s inside of headers. We can chain that by using spaces as deep as we want. So hey, give me all p tags that are in header tags, that are in section tags, that are in div tags, that are in body tags, that are in HTML tags. We can use that entire long selector if we wanted to. It's very specific and not very flexible, but we can.
Why would we do that instead of using like an ID?
I would.
Okay, just.
Yeah. Especially with the CSS selectors, there's doesn't have ways to skin this cat.
Gotcha.
Some people like to use really specific selectors like that, like, oh, here's my entire HTML element. I'm going to select that one using this 100-character long thing. I give that exact same reaction. It's like, why do we do that? Because even though, yes, HTML and CSS really lean on each other hard, we have to play a delicate balance of trying to decouple them as much as possible. So decouple is a kind of a fun word to know about. What does decoupling mean?
Like break the link between them.
Yeah, is separate them, break the link. Is I should be able to change my HTML without having to change too much CSS, and vice versa. So if we use a really long specific thing, like here, header and H1s, let's say 6 months down the road, it's no longer a header tag, but it's a section tag. Now my CSS is busted. Easy fix, but I still have to fix it. So it's kind of a balance. Like I would do maybe a guideline that's like 3 or 4 tags deep at the most, but not too many.
So dot selected and top choice and header, those are all considered properties? Or
Those are all selectors.
all selectors.
Those are all just different ways that we can query for elements inside the DOM.
Can you have the header H1 dot selector?
Yeah, these are the simple ones. They get crazy.
Yeah.
In a good way. And the last one is that we can have multiple selectors that all have the same properties. So we're saying, hey, all A tags, all EM tags, and everything that has the class cat will get these rules, whatever those rules are. So if we have a lot of things that are clickable on my page, like a link, a button, and maybe a div, I give them all the same style, no matter where they are. Just kind of fun tools to have in your tool belt.
So the reason for the comma is because you're putting a class and a tag and you're mixing up the.
Exactly.
Okay.
Commas mean multiple tag selectors are in the same line. Spaces mean we're building up something. We're building up a complex group. That's the difference between 17 and 22.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so if we're using commas, we're creating multiple selectors for the same declaration. So we're saying if it's an A tag or an EM tag or has the class of cat. If we're using a space separated list, that means we're actually targeting all H1s inside of headers.
Gotcha.
So it's an and versus an or.
It's just a specificity.
So comma is and is or and space is and.
Yep.
Now that header H1 isn't gonna affect all of the header, right? It's only gonna affect H1 and header?
Correct.
Okay.
Properties we like. So if we go to MDN, just like MDN has a laundry list of HTML tags, they also have a
I did fix that one, by the way, in the network.
Thank you,
So
Gavin.
fixed. Cool. I heard someone say it was broken, so I
yes, awesome. Thanks, Gavin. So yeah, like if we go to MDN, CSS, properties, there is a lot.
What did you search?
MDN?
MDN CSS properties. MDN, is, we talked about it yesterday. Just say again, it's Mozilla Developer Network. Really cool resource for all things front end. So JavaScript, HTML, CSS, really solid resource. There's other stuff out there like W3 Schools and stuff like that, but like MDN is like a solid choice. I typically prefix all my searches for like MDN and CSS properties, just so I know exactly where to go. But as we saw, hundreds, thousands, do you know how many there are, Gavin?
Yeah, in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Properties. And it's growing all the time as we add new things.
Yes. You don't have to learn them all. I don't think anyone really knows them all.
No.
But there are a few that we do like. And I will send this link out in Slack.
These are the ones that you'll find in general in buildings on any page you're going to use the most.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that you're going to go back to time and time again. So just want to make a place in the handbook where you get a quick reference to see what they are.
So it's all things about background. Is there a background image? Is there a background color? Background position? All things borders, colors, cursors. And we'll kind of use these as we go. But use this as kind of like a general reference to like, I don't know what I want to do here. What options do I have? Kind of a good starting point.
Yeah, it's nice if you click on maybe like one of the background, like find background size, it'll take you to the link inside of MDN. And one of the nice things that they have there is a couple of live examples that work through different options. You're like, well, I know I want to do something with the size of my background. You can click on each of those and it'll essentially show you the effect you're looking for. I think you can even play around with the data that's in there and change those values.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. So if you're like, oh, what happens if I make my background size a different number instead of that percentage? You can see what effect it has. So what you want to be thinking about is what's the thing I want to have happen? Can I find a word in that list that matches it? And then go to MDN and kind of play around with the effect there before you try and plop it into your own code. Then below it, as Mark's showing, is like, that's like the tech geek specificity of like exactly how does that work. I use all kinds of different examples, and then down below is the deep syntax and values and expressions of how everything works. That's the stuff you dive into and you're like, okay, how does this really work? Or why when I changed it, I didn't do what I did. And then down below is more specificity of how that works.
Probably the majority of the time, I tend to stop here on a page.
Yep. That's about to where I go.
Yeah.
I like the examples because it kind of explains what the things do. And then if all of a sudden it doesn't really work when I get it into my code,
Then
I'll
it's
start
like-
to dig below that.
Yep.
But usually by the time you get to the examples and the syntax, you've got enough covered to kind of figure out what you want to pull from this and try using in your own CSS. And pretty much every one of those that we link has an example set like this. So they're really good to kind of play around with as you're trying to figure out how to use them.
this is like preference almost at some point, like how you wanna style an image, right? Like it's very up to you.
It gives you the tools to kind of style it however you want.
Yeah.
There are some really cool things done in CSS. A site called CodePen is a really fun site to kind of click around and see what's going on. CodePen it's the same one that's in the homework we use, or not the homework, the handbook. We use that extensions a lot. But it's a playground for people to write front-end code, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS to kind of see what's possible. And you can do pretty much anything you want with CSS. I've seen like Battleship games made with CSS, like fully functional. That was nuts.
Yeah, if you want a good example of like how far can you take CSS, CSS Garden,
Yes.
CSS Zen Garden, is a good example.
Yep.
This is a site that the HTML on every one of these examples is exactly the same.
Mhm.
The only thing that's different is the CSS. And you can see like people who are masters of CSS, how far you can take just style.
Yeah. So this is what I was chatting about earlier. How like if we have one HTML page, we should be, in theory, in a well-crafted HTML page, should be able to just switch out the CSS and get an entirely different page. And this is exactly what people have done here. Like, hey, here's my sample HTML file. And when I go and view all the designs,
I think on the right hand side is the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so like all of these pages, all of these different layouts, the HTML is exactly the same. Yeah, and like that's where we want to drive with our CSS and our HTML design creating. Don't feel pressured to make stuff at this level quite yet.
These are like world class CSS.
Yeah.
designers, right? They're just kind of showing that the difference, like Mark was saying, right? The skeleton versus the skin. Right?
Mhm.
It's the same skeleton on every page. We just put a different skin on each one of those.
Can I change it? The all
So on the right hand
designs.
side, if you click on some of those links in the green sidebar, those will
Ah.
be different pages.
Okay.
That are styled the same.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah, so
Right.
drastically different.
And this is all CSS.
Yeah, just CSS.
Are they pulling images from the CSS?
So that's a really good question. Is what the images are, because it's always a question of what's content versus what's style. So we see here this image of the Boy Scouts saluting the computer is actually part of the content. Not really, right? So in that case, the CSS is pulling the images. But if we're making a company directory where every employee gets an actual picture, that picture is part of the content. So that's when we would use an image tag inside of our HTML.
Or if the announcement is a picture,
Yes.
it's part of the content as
Yep.
well.
Yep. So like a splash page or a picture with a website with a pretty picture in the background, that's probably not part of the content. But if the picture is like, oh, check out all these bags of trash that people got, like that's part of the content.
But that's still preference, isn't it?
No, it's he's saying like if it's artwork, right?
Yeah.
And it's just part of the look of your page, it's in CSS.
It's more
If it's
integrated.
content, like you want them to be able to download a picture, or you want them to click the picture and
yeah.
just a link, or if you want it to be like something that
Yeah,
everybody
sure.
can get from them.
Yeah.
You know, like you want people to download your pretty cat picture.
The other way to think about it, would the page still work if that image were gone? Would this page still make sense if that page wasn't there? It still makes sense with the image gone, then it's decorative. If that image is gone, doesn't make sense, then it's content. Right? So if you're doing an employee directory and part of what you're showing is what that person looks like, that is part of your content. If it is the logo of the company at the top of the page, that's probably more decorative.
What all I think has
Is that because
Yeah.
the CSS could be like if you're on an old device, the CSS might not apply or something?
It's mostly just in terms of, it comes back to the idea of semantics,
Mhm.
right? What is important to a page in terms of the data, the content, versus the style. It also applies to things like screen readers and those kinds of things. What are things that this page could skip that are not important? Because things like screen readers will skip things like CSS background images.
Yeah.
Because they're assuming that that is decorative and a vision impaired person doesn't need to be read what that image is. What they're really concerned about is being efficient with the content. So when you think about content versus style, it applies to lots of things.
So if it was like a joke that your background image was, you know, something that related to what was written in there, then you would want to put it in HTML because it's important for them to read it too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
others, you know, something in the background that's making it funny. You know.
Yeah, like, you know, this example is a very good one, right? Like, that page would still work if we didn't have that picture.
Yeah,
Well, in that film.
yeah, this is kind of just a statement. About 6 months ago, I worked for a company that sold out, or they bought, someone bought. So we had to change all the branding on all the sites. So some of the content, which we're announcing, we're doing the picnic on April. That was content, but the logo and all of they changed the color, the naming, all of that was more static, and we looked at, okay, is this permanent for the company or is this temporary, meaning is this stuff we're just going to be showing?
Yep.
And the permanent stuff is what went into the CSS and the branding.
Mhm.
The content stuff that was changing constantly and just announcements and information that were conveying to the company, that was classified as content. So,
I don't know if I know the answer to this, but how important is it to employers to be, if you're doing front end development, to be like an artist as well? Like you can do Adobe, you can
So,
draw. Like,
This is what skill set you want to have.
Mhm.
There is a lot of, but not everywhere, and it's kind of the mindset's changing. Go back 5 years ago, if you were a front end developer, I kind of assumed you had some design experience.
Right.
But nowadays it's no longer the case. It's a useful skill to have, and just being a front end developer is really kind of limited in scope by itself. Usually people are, I'm a front end developer and designer. I'm a front end developer and a back end developer.
Okay.
There's usually an and there,
Okay.
but if you really want to fulfill that niche market, like that's totally doable as well.
I have one more question. So for SEO purposes, what's more important, CSS or HTML?
HTML is what I would say.
What was your question?
What's more important for SEO? Search engine optimization. And which is a whole nother, like we could teach an entire cohort just on SEO. So yeah. Same with design, we can teach a whole cohort just on design skills.
Which is then separate from user experience, which is separate from user interface.
Yes.
Oh,
We
that's,
touch on
okay.
those things
Yeah.
though a little
So are
bit.
those defined under UX?
Yeah, so your designer is concerned about things like colors and balance and white space and the overall look and feel and the branding aspect, right? When you look at something like Suncoast.io, it has a very distinct look to it, right? That's something that your designer is going to do. The user experience person is thinking about the flow of the application, is information presented at the right time, at the right level of detail. How does the search work? How do things move on the page? The
Okay.
user interface person is mostly concerned about like the widgets on the page. When it clicks, does it click the right way? Does it do the right thing? And then there's a little bit of a blend there with sort of the front end engineer who's like writing the JavaScript to make that happen. Sometimes those are very distinct people in a company, right? If you look at like Microsoft, they have designers, they have user experience people, they have user interface people, and then they have the developers who are developing the front end. Come to a smaller company and those roles start to blend together into like a startup where that may be one person who's doing all of those things together.
Yeah, and we won't touch on that much, but it will be like a cursory topic because we can't build stuff without talking about it. And we're not gonna like dedicate time to it. It'll be like, oh, we should put buttons here, or we should watch color schemes here. Around week 4, we do a really cool assignment where we learn about color theory and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I know. It's kind of like, so like, even though it's not a, and we also have a guest speaker come in at some point who does like a design for developers. So like, what as developers do you need to know, what design do you need to know to be a good developer? Because all the best developers know a little bit of design, and all the best designers know a little bit about developing. It kind of works both ways. So even though we're not going to cover it in like a formal lecture, it will still be a topic to talk about. But we can implement all of those really cool ideas with our CSS. So, feeling good so far? I like it. So the first part about CSS that we always talk about is something called the box model. So the box model is how we kind of design and implement and give spacing for each object. And for each object, I mean each element that's on the page. So each element, each HTML tag has its own little box. And really when we said yesterday that each element's like a Lego piece, that's really what it is. Each element is a box. You see that we have the content, which is what the actual text is. So yesterday when we did the P tag, whatever we wrote our paragraph in, that's the actual content. Then between the content and the border, which is this blue line right here, can you see that in the back? That blue line, that's the border. So you can kind of think of that as kind of like the picture frame. And if that picture frame has matting, has any sort of space in between it, that's what's called the padding. So if we had a big picture frame but a wee little tiny picture, we'd have a lot of empty white space there, right? So that would be a whole lot of padding. We're pushing the content in.
So you can increase the padding to make this image smaller.
To make the content in the middle smaller. Yes.
Okay.
If you increase the padding too much, does it affect font size?
It does not affect font size, but it affects word wrapping and stuff like that. So if you ever see like text going a little bit longer, maybe skewed a little tighter, that means that the padding's too high. We'll play with the padding values later and kind of see what happens. But the font size is entirely different CSS property.
This is what they're called in those, what are they called? Specifications, properties.
Yeah, properties. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right idea. Just kind of getting the words there. But yeah,
Right.
these are, you'll find padding's a property,
Okay.
borders a property, and margin, the space on the outside, that's a property. And those are all things that we can kind of change.
And margin and padding are white space. Border is
The actual border itself.
Yeah.
So like here, this right here, hopefully she's done with this. And I'm gonna mark this thing all up. So that right there is the content, and that's it. The space between here and here, that's padding. So here we could have padding of 1, some random unit. Up here we'd have padding of 0.5.
So you can still color it though. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yep.
Okay.
This would have the same background, this have the same color as the background color of this element. So this would be like, I don't know, 4. And this would probably be 1 as well.
And do you always have to put the 4 numbers for top, left, or top, right, bottom, that's the order, right? Top, right, bottom, left.
I always get the word wrong. But you don't have to. There's shorthand, so you can say, hey, padding equals 1, and they'll give you 1 padding the entire way around.
Okay.
Or you can say padding equals 1 space 3. That'll give you 1 on the top, 3 on the left, 3 on the right, and 1 on the bottom. Or you can do all 4 and actually specify each one. There's a lot of shorthand properties like that. So yeah, cool. So back to our example here. This silver lining, like the actual border here, that's the border. The border's the border. That's what's actually containing everything inside of it. That's like, oh, here's my entire block that I'm moving back and forth. And then from there you have margin, which is the stuff on the outside.
So your border's your hard edge, and then your margin's like how far away you want it
Yep.
from the.
So if I wanted this right up against the wall, margin 0. Margin 5. Or whatever that is. Missing a cat.
So margin's value won't directly change border padding, but border and padding will directly change each other.
So border and padding, all these values are independent from each other.
Okay.
So like I can increase padding, and my border would stay the same.
Okay.
I can increase margin, and my padding would stay the same. It would be physically moving over on the screen a little
Right.
bit, but it would still be however big it was.
But if you're at a limited space, is it gonna keep pushing it? It
It'll,
will
it'll,
decrease
it'll
the
do
value.
its best.
Okay.
It's dynamic, yeah.
This- This is where CSS gets hard.
Yes.
Because if we change one thing, 3 things might break. Did you ever see, you'll see it today. There's a gif of someone trying to fix blinds. You know?
Actually, that's the main reason I'm here.
Yeah, it's the main reason I'm here too.
CSS, trying
Yeah,
to fix it.
yeah, I know, it's something. So yeah, that's where we're gonna get to today. We're gonna actually build something. Nothing too crazy. We're gonna build a something. Right? So for this, I'm going to be writing code. This is kind of the first time I'm writing code for y'all. I highly, highly recommend you don't try to follow along. Don't try to type with me to kind of keep up. I'd rather you be here taking notes, typing up notes, writing down stuff, writing down key things, asking questions, being here with me, than trying to keep up with me. Because you will not live. I'm just going to say that now. You won't be able to keep up. So, we're in 14. Here. So I'm going to create a new directory. And just like we did yesterday, I'm going to create a new project. And let's call this, what's a good one? Let's call this, I have two code samples in my head. We can either do a get cheat sheet, or we can do a student directory. All right, sounds good. Get cheat sheet. And probably a bit more educational, because I'm sure Git was fun for a lot of people last night. No? We all know Git already? Cool. So we're going to use AppApp. A lot easier. So we're going to use AppApp. That's our scaffolding tool. We're going to name it Git cheat sheet. We're going to pick the alpha stack. That's fine. For this, I do not. Doing this, all this fun stuff.
So where does it put it if you don't make a repository?
So here's, you ruined my spoiler and my gift for the end of lecture. Every cohort gets a repository of all the class notes. So this is actually already in a repository. So I'm making a new project inside of a Git repository already.
So we can access this?
Yeah, every code samples I do in class are all yours. I don't care, I don't want to have, that's why I don't want you to follow along, because you're going to get the code samples. Yeah. So let's open this up. And let's start it. So let's head back into our app, and this is where we are. We have our HTML, and now you notice we haven't really talked about yet how to actually use CSS inside of our project. That's because there's 3 different ways to use it inside of our project. The first one is inline style. This is where we can do things like, hey, style equals color red. Nah, I don't like red. Let's do, let's do chocolate, because I'm in a very chocolate mood today. So I'm now saying, hey, here is my element. It has a style attribute, and I'm giving it a semicolon separated list of CSS properties and values. So I can say color is chocolate, and my semicolon background color is, what's a good contrast to chocolate? Mint. Whoever said that, you get a gold star. So yeah, so now I'm saying, hey, my text color is going to be chocolate. My background color is going to be mint cream, whatever that's going to look like. So this is an inline styling. This is the most specific thing we can have. 95% of the time, don't do this. And we'll get into why in a second.
Since this is the most specific thing you have, will the CSS style sheet override this? If you
No.
delete all the headings?
This will override CSS.
That's why you don't want to do it.
It's also not flexible and also not reusable and also not maintainable. It also makes my HTML look all and also goes back to the point we first made. Now I'm embedding my style into my HTML. Yeah.
Good for testing.
But not good for maintainability. And maintainability is this concept that we'll talk about. It's doing yourself a favor later. Is if I have to go back and change this code, how easy is it for me to change it? So let's see what this does. Hey, we did stuff. You'll notice that the box model here, our H1 tag goes across the entire page. You can see that mint cream background from way back here. It's like, hey, it goes 100% of the page across. So that's cool. It's fine. Change the background color and change that. That's the first way to apply CSS properties. But like we said, it's not the best. A better way, but still not the best, what you'll see is inside the head, we can add a style tag. And this says, hey, inside of this page, because remember the head is where we put the metadata for about the HTML page. Inside this page, we have some styling that I want you to follow. So I can take my properties and actually make my first class here and go, hey, all my H1 tags have color of, well, actually reverse it, background color, chocolate.
And what's this type of, what's this called again? Categorically?
Style inside the head.
Styling inside the header.
Yeah, inside the head.
Inside the head.
And this is fine because now, instead of me having to repeat that style attribute for every H1 tag, instead of me having to repeat that, I can just say, hey, I have one rule for my entire page, saying, and my selector says all H1 tags have this style.
So it breaks it without even putting like a p tag in between it.
Yep. So this is kind of what we were hinting at a little bit yesterday. H1s have some built-in styling. They have some margins on the outside. They have some font sizes. It does things for us automatically. And what does it give us? Well, let's find out. I saw some of you were playing with this yesterday, but Chrome and other browsers, but Chrome comes with DevTools. So I'm going to right-click something on the page and hit Inspect, and that's going to bring up
The code for the page.
a interactive code REPL almost for the page. So now I can actually go in and see what's happening, see the HTML that's being rendered out, see all the CSS properties that are on it that are being computed, and everything. So if I go in, I'll make this bigger.
That's showing you the margin, showing you
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if I come down and click on an H1 tag, you notice as I hover over it, it tells me which one's selected. We see that blue highlighted area, that's the actual box model. That's the content, as well as anything that's inside of the border. So that's the actual silver frame. The kind of yellowish, orangish, brownish, funky color. I don't know what color that is.
mustard.
Mustard. Nice round mustard color. That's showing us the margin. That's the entire space that the element's taking up. So you see, it's like, hey, this thing is only this big, But really, it's box model. It's saying, hey, it's this big. And we can use this to kind of see physically where our elements are on the page. And then if I click it, I can go, hey, here's my styles that I see, right? Chocolate and mint cream. But also here's user agent styling that comes to us from the browser. So it gets a font size of 2, it has some margins around it, doing some fancy things. It's giving us those stylings for free. And that's why we kind of see them bumped off of each other a little bit. Chrome is going, hey, you told me in your HTML this stuff is H1s. I'm now going to make this look like a big header for you.
It's a default.
Yep. Is that good? Is that bad?
It's good.
Depends.
It just is. So
It
you
just
work
is.
with it.
It just is the thing. You work with it. Sometimes you need it. Sometimes you want it. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you don't. It's a thing.
So if your style sheet said display flex, is that going to override that?
Yep. So let's say we don't want that margin. We want our stuff sandwiched right together. What we can do is here we can go, hey, you know what? All of our margins are actually 0. We're going to nullify them out. We're going to reset them back to nothing. So now you notice they're now smushed right up against each other. If I hover over them, you notice we lost those mustard borders now. Those are now gone. Our box model just got a little bit smaller, and that's okay. And just to see the other side of that, the padding, we give it a padding of 3 rems, and we'll get back to rems in a second. It's going to blow up. Because each one of these, we see now we get our mustard stuff back. But our mustard stuff is now inside of our box, is now inside of the border. That means that our padding is now bigger. How about the other side?
The padding's just like the inside border.
It's
another border.
the padding is spaced inside.
It's the margin between your text box or your content box and your border box.
So okay. So like your content's always gonna be centered on the border, but it won't be centered on the padding.
Not necessarily, yeah. It's also sort of, kind of maybe, sort of. Guess no, maybe.
You have word, you can do top left, right, so it doesn't have to be centered either.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, centering, it's a different thing we're going to get to tomorrow, because that's with the Flexbox, which is fun. Might get to it today.
Sorry, I'm confused as to why we're seeing that color on top, the mustard color.
It's like a
That's-
highlight.
It's highlighting, and it's showing us where the extra white space is. In this case, our extra white space is inside. It's the padding. So the entire element is this big now. But it's saying your actual content is only right here. And that's it.
And so when you changed the padding, did that change the value of the margin? Or
Nope,
margin
margin is
just
still
appeared?
0.
It's still 0.
Yep. Remember, the margin and the padding are independent of each other. You can change one without affecting the other.
So is the margin underneath the padding now? Or
Nope, beside it. So if I wanted to change this from 0 to 1, just to give them some space here now. We'll see now we're going to see them separate out just a little bit.
So the margin's outside the actual element?
Yep.
But everything else is inside?
Your margin's your crust.
Yeah, the margin is how close can I get to something. It's, hey, is my margin 0? Or is it 1? Is it 2? It's how close can I get to the elements around me.
And all these properties are based off of the H1 text.
It's because that's my query selector. That's what I'm using to query. If I add an H2,
just get small.
my H2 tag, correct, it will have none of that styling. It's back to the default styling that we get with the browser. because I haven't done anything with it yet.
So I know you did it 3 rounds, so that gives you the padding all the way around. But your right seems like it has more padding than your left, according to the text.
According to the text.
So we're just doing for the padding.
Yep.
all the way around.
Yes, this is content agnostic. So it doesn't matter whether the content's text or images or anything like that. This is just saying, hey, we have some content. And if we look at the H1, and use our handy dev tools, we see now that we have 2 new shades of mustard for our margin and our padding. But this blue bar that's right across the middle, that's our actual content. So you see our text is left aligned. I could center the text, text align center. And now I've said, hey, take my text and center it within the content.
And the box will still be on.
Yep, the box is still 100%. My margin, my paddings are still
Can you
untouched.
shrink that box at all? If you need to.
Shrink it? Yeah. Yeah, that'd be using a width, or maybe we put more margins on the outsides to make it a little bit smaller. Yes. Feeling okay? Cool. So that's great. We're styling stuff, using stuff inside the head. That's all fine and dandy. We know that websites have multiple pages, right? I go from one page to the next. If I wanted to reuse this styling on a second page, I'm going to have to copy my entire style tag to each page. And if I want to try to change it, I have to change it on every page, and it gets kind of tedious and unwieldy after a while. So this is where the screen.css file comes into play. So I'm going to remove this, get rid of that. I'm going to head over there, and we see that it is linked inside of our head, right here. Just how the style tag was saying, hey, browser, our page has some styling. That link is going, hey, browser, my page has some styling that's located inside of this file. So it's located inside of screen.css. And if we head over to screen.css, we see it's a whole bunch of CSS rules, declarations, properties. This is our CSS file. This is where you should be writing all of your CSS. Sound good? Cool. I don't want to see any inline, any in the head, everything inside of there.
So instead of doing inline or in the head, you just want to do like an ID tag or anything, but doing the inline or the inside the head, right? Because that would be just like not very efficient.
Yes. And it's good practice to keep everything inside the separate file. Yeah. Now, of course, inside your HTML, you will have class equals blah or ID equals blah to help signify what is what. But the actual styling rules and properties and declarations are going to be over here in your screen.css.
The / before screen.css means it's in the same directory or one?
So that href, that link, is a relative link.
Okay.
So it's saying, hey, in the same directory, actually that's saying go to my top level domain and find something called screen.css.
href is saying go to something in my
That's
go
what
to the top domain?
that's what that slash screen
Oh,
is.
go to the top domain.
So like this is the same as going, hey, localhost 3000 / screen.css.
So you can do that with link.
Yeah, you could.
So
Yep.
you could link an external style sheet and change the look of an entire page
Mhm.
pretty quick. So would that override any HTML or anything that's embedded?
Anything that's embedded inside the page. So if I link to a CSS at someplace else and pull that in,
So like let's say you have like a page
Mhm.
that somebody else had like embedded their style into the into the HTML. So it, like if you added a style sheet on top of that, would it override anything that was embedded in that? Or would it-
potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on how the cascading and the rules of specificity played out, it would mess with things.
Or break.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying mess with things.
Okay, so
Yeah, and that's actually a popular strategy, is to have our CSS being served from something called a CDN content delivery network. And all that's as a fancy word for saying this server is specialized in serving files really fast, serving static files really fast. Because remember, this is just a static file. This is just a file that's on a computer somewhere. That's it. So if we can host our CDN, host our style sheet on something that's really fast for hosting static files, it'll load a lot faster. So they might be someplace else. Or they can be on the same server and just with /screen.css. But those problems of like loading times and speeds, you probably don't have to worry about. Unless you're working on like a really big project, like Twitter size stuff. So yeah, that's saying, hey, go to my root domain, find something called screen.css. If I didn't have the slash there, it's now going to look in the same directory for it. So should this still work? Yes. But as we've seen URLs before, they can have like example.com/pages/people/mark/food/favorite/bleh. We don't know where we are. That's a whole different routing problem. So we're saying, hey, you know what? Always look at that top level for something called screen.css.
I noticed that when we started the project, the screen.css file was already created for us.
Yes.
But if it wasn't created for us,
Make a new file.
just make a new file.
You can make a new file, call it styles.css, and you're off to the races. You link that and you're good to go. But for now, all of your styles should be in one file.
So just real quick, if styles was in a folder, would that / still work?
Yep,
We'll still find it?
it'd be, so if, just to go on a side tangent, that's a really good thing. You'll see something like this, like styles as a folder, and add something called main.css, something like that. In order for me to link this style sheet that's inside of a folder, my index would say, hey, link /styles /main.css. So now, just think that like that slash means the public folder.
Okay.
That's whatever's publicly available for that website to see.
Styles is in the public folder.
If you have both those lines of code referencing screen.css and styles and main.css,
Yep.
which one wins?
Both and neither.
That's fun.
Yeah, it goes back to what Liv, right, was saying, how it's like if we have two different style sheets, who wins? And it comes down to the order of specificity. You actually see this happen a lot. So we'll have multiple style sheets on the same page.
Okay.
And it's like, hey, here's our base styles, and here's my stuff that I'm going to override the base styles with, and extend it. So eventually we'll get to something called Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a CSS framework that does a lot of heavy lifting for us with styling. But their styling is great for about 60% of the time. So we would take Bootstrap and extend it, override it, and add to it in our own style sheet. So then we're leaving Bootstrap styles, and then we're overriding it and adding to it with our own style sheet. So that's a very common thing to see. Cool. So now that we've kind of saw CSS in action, let's build something. I'm going to go and delete this. I am going to delete this as well. Come over here. Delete this as well. I'm going to be a good developer, and I'm going to commit my code. Oh man, there we go. So when I say good developer and commit my code, we use kind of Git yesterday as going, hey, we're done with our project. I'm saving it and pushing it to GitHub, right? But in practice, Git should be used kind of like a save point in video games a lot. After every level, after every upgrade, after every feature, after every idea that's done. So here we just did an idea, right? We created the project. So I'm going to make my first Git commit here. git add space dot and git commit dash m removed scaffolded stuff. And saying, hey, I did stuff, I committed it. I don't have to push. So I can now go back and continue. But what this does, this creates a point in time that if and when I foobar my code, I can go back to it.
And it's named remove scaffold stuff.
Yep,
That's your save point name. Or whatever.
yep. That's me giving it some meaningful name. More than a word, less than a novel. I know that's a big range, but that's really what it should be. Something meaningful that you can go back to in 6 months and go, that's what I did. For my own projects, I kind of like to say, here's what I did, here's what I have to do next, to kind of help like organize myself. But that's just me.
So next time you change the code and you update your Git, you just do Git push, or do you have to commit as well?
Commit.
You also
Every
commit?
change is a new commit.
Okay. And then it's not going to override any old commitments or anything.
It will add to it.
I'll add to it.
So you'll see like, oh, we should have about 5 or 6 commits over the course of the hour. And they'll all be like a chain of like, here's my history of the files.
What's the M option?
Message,
Message. That's to specify that what you're putting next is your
Which
name
is-
of your save
which
point.
is required. So I'm sure some of you ran into that last night too. Oh, message is required. So. Cool. So let's work on, with every good HTML page, let's work on the content first. So I'm going to make something called a wireframe. And that's a term that you'll hear a lot over the next couple of weeks. And what a wireframe is a detailed enough drawing of what you're going to be making. This drawing could be on a whiteboard. It could be in Illustrator, it could be in Photoshop, it can be in Word, it can be in Excel, it can be in a notebook. It doesn't matter where, but it's just, hey, what am I building? This wireframe will become a blueprint for what we're going to be creating. Why do we do this? Anyone have any ideas?
You can, a lot of times you get the information from someone who you're building the site for, and so you do the wireframe so you're both in sync on how the page is going to look before you get started.
Yes. It's pretty much like, hey, we have ideas of what we want to make. So 10 minutes ago, like, hey, let's make ourselves a Git cheat sheet, right? I bet you there's 12 of us in this room. Each one of us thinks it will look slightly different, right? I'm sure if I get, hey, go to your notebooks, open up, draw a wireframe the way you want the page to look like, we'd have 12 different designs. Maybe 13 if someone got adventures. So wireframes just give us kind of like a blueprint, a plan, to be like, oh, here's what we're building, just so we're all on the same page. How detailed do you want it to be? The more detailed, the better. I can't just go, hey, here's my website, I have a header, some boxes, and some text, and some stuff, and call it a day. That's not useful. On the flip side, you don't have to be an artist and render out an entire page by yourself by hand on a whiteboard or a notebook. There is a happy balance. Where that is project dependent and skill dependent. You'll see me make wireframes that actually look like that, but I know what that means. I've been doing it for over a decade. So let's make a really good wireframe of what we want our page to look like. So we want our web page. We want it to have a header, right? We'll call it Git cheat sheet. And we'll give it a subheader that says, useful Git commands. You notice how I didn't write down everything, I just kind of abbreviated it, but I know that that's text. Now, how do we want to lay this out? This is a little bit of the design-ish aspect, but really it's important just to get it on the page. Don't let perfection be the enemy or done or anything. So it's like, hey, I want to just have a glossary of commands. So one command, git add. And below it, we'll throw a little arrow there. And then below it, I want to have a description of what it does. And that's it, nothing too crazy. Maybe for flavor, I can throw this into a box. That's kind of say, here's one command. That way we can kind of repeat this for each command. And then we can even draw it out a little bit. And let's throw this into a header section of its own. That's going to be colored slightly different. How do we feel with that?
It's beautiful.
Right? But now me as a developer, I can now start picking this apart a little bit. And going, oh, okay, where's my headers? Where's my sections? Where's my tags? So, let's start picking this apart. Notice how I haven't written a single line of code yet, right? So this looks to be like
H1.
an H1. Yep. How about this thing?
That is a table.
A div?
Ooh, so it's div. Table. What else was said?
Fig.
A fig.
You can even make it a P.
A P. Which one's right? Which one's wrong?
Alright.
Over right, over wrong. And this kind of is a real example. It's like, hey, which one's the best value for what's going on here? I see a list. Because we have one command followed by another command and another command.
So an unordered list.
It's an unordered list. An unordered list. This would then be an LI. And then inside of that LI, we could do a table, we could do maybe a header. And a P tag. And just say at the end of the day, there's no wrong answer. It's whatever makes the most sense to you and your team at the given time that you can actually use it to reference to what's going on. Could we do these with all P tags? Yes. All divs? Yes. All tables? Yes. Should we? No. Will it be easy? I don't know. I look at this and go, well, UIs and LIs, we know have some default styling, right? So I know already I'm going to be fighting with it a little bit to kind of make it look how I want it to look. Is that a fight that I want to fight? It can be. I mean, that's a CSS property list style, none. So like it doesn't matter. But those are some considerations taken into account. And on the flip side, if that P tag is also going to have styling, I'll probably keep that the way it is. So that's usually step 0 for a website. Whenever you go for your homeworks, your capstones, your whatever project you're going to be building for me in the next 12 weeks, this is usually a really good first step. When you get week 13, starting your careers, this should always be a good first step. And I'm like, hey, what does it do? So now, let's actually start creating this. So we're going to have an H1 tag, get cheat sheet. We'll go with that.
What did you call that diagram? A
Wireframe. Yep. There's a plethora of tools online, and we'll dive into it later. But I honestly, of all the tools and stuff online, I always come back to a whiteboard or a notebook. H1, H2. Here are some useful information, useful Git commands for a new developer. And then we have a list, right? So UL, we have an LI, So now I know, in the back of my head, and because we see it here, that we're gonna have a lot of different commands here, right? But I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna style just one, and then copy and paste it over and over. That's what I'm gonna do. So here we are. We have our LI. We said we'd have a header tag as well as a p tag, and that's it. So let's do this real fast. We have a command. Let's insert an emoji real fast. Arrow. Do you have that one? Aha, here we go. Get add dot. And our p tag is, so pop quiz. What does get add dot do?
Add
Current
new
directory.
information or something?
It adds new information about the current directory. Tells Git that there are changes to track on in the current directory. Also adds any new files to Git, to the current Git repo. Yeah, there we go.
So you copy that entire unordered list to open to close.
Not the
And just
unordered
change.
list, but just the list items.
Oh, list.
Yep, that's it.
Is that the header? What is that tiny character? After you're open?
This,
Yeah.
it's an emoji.
Oh.
Just a little arrow. That's all. Could probably do it something like that to actually, to something to style it.
Command.
On a Mac, it's Control Command Space to bring up the menu. On a Windows, it's Windows Alt Space, I think. Don't quote me on that one. I don't really use emojis except for demoing stuff because they're fun and easy images, but they're there. So we have one. Let's see how this looks. Not too terrible. So let's go. Let's add some coloring. Let's add some spacing, some margins. Let's kind of let things breathe a little bit. This is a cool tool I like to use to pick a color scheme. It's called a Coolers. Coolers.co. And what this does, this like, hey, here's a color scheme that's randomly generated that will look good enough. After it loads.
Cooler singular is percent.
Is it? How we all doing? Kind of chilling here. There we go. So like, here's my colors I'm going to use for my page. Doesn't matter what they are, we can change them later. You notice how it gives us both the name as well as some really weird number that starts with a hash.
The X.
Yes, that's what's called a hex code. And that is a 6-digit number that represents the color.
We gotta
So it
memorize
says-
those, right?
100%, all, whatever you guys are. But each digit in that number is a hexadecimal number. That just means it goes from 0 to F. So 0 will give you 5, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. F's are black or is it white? I honestly forget this.
I think it's white.
I think it's white.
I think it's white because zeros are black.
Yep. That would make sense. Black is nothing, white is everything, apparently. I don't know. I don't know color theory. But yeah, So each one of these values, we can actually change what it is.
It's based on light, right? So if there's
Yeah.
no light, right, it's dark.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so it's different between like paint colors and light colors mixed differently.
Yes.
With light, right, because light's emitting out of your screen. If there was no light coming out, it would be dark, so those are your zeros. And if every
lights.
color in the spectrum was available, that would be white.
Okay.
Yeah, because when we get to the color picker, there's a whole
Yeah,
color
whole,
area
yeah.
to read more details. So that's why 0 and
0 and Fs.
1% are
Yes.
white.
So zeros are black, Fs are white. As you see, our almost white here is almost all Fs. And our darkest color is the lowest value down there. And we can use those. So earlier I was using like chocolate and mint cream, right? Well, instead of using those named standard values in HTML, I can now use these hex codes to style it to any color that I want to fit inside of that crazy high number spectrum.
So what's the benefit of using hex? You get a broader spectrum of.
Broader, more specific, and that mint cream may not be the same mint cream everywhere.
Monitors.
But yes, monitors, phones, browser implementations of it. We've all agreed that mint cream is whatever value hexadecimal that is, but that could change. Some designer for Chrome could go, you know what, mint cream should be slightly more mint and slightly less cream. And now your entire web scheme is off.
So these are more numbers.
And more specific. So I'm actually going to take this, copy it, and I'm going to go, hey, body, your background color should be hashtag blah. And even our editor's starting to recognize that, going, oh, you gave me this color. Here's a little preview of it. So now if I come back to it, you'll notice that now it's starting to look more like an actual website. Rarely do websites actually use pure white for background colors. It's usually some off-white or eggshell white or white smoke or something like that. It's just a little bit easier for the eyes and looks a bit more aesthetically pleasing. So let's style up the header a little bit. Let's make it bigger and let's center it and give it its own space. So whenever you hear give things its own space, that's usually a margin or a padding thing. Just kind of, can we bump it off a little bit? So I want to target my header right here. So I could just say, hey, all H1s get this style, but this is a specific H1 that I'm using for my page header. It'd be a really good idea for either an ID or a class, right? Let's do class equals page header. Then over here, I can do page header. And actually, we can make this a little bit easier on ourselves by splitting them. Yeah, right. Woo. And just say it again, if I do anything with my editor that you're like, wait, how did you do that? Stop me and I'll walk you through it. Because there's a lot of tips and tricks for using editors that we just won't cover formally, that you just kind of learn and explore naturally. So just stop me and ask, like, hey, how did you do that?
I have a why and not a how.
Okay, well, what's your why?
Why did you make it a class and not an ID?
So it's a great question because it probably could be an ID. Because I'm sure that's what you're thinking, right? There's only one page
There's only
header,
gonna be one.
right? I could make it an ID, but IDs, if you have too many IDs, they tend to slow down your pages.
Oh, okay.
Also, now when I say too many, I mean like hundreds of thousands. So it's like, just to keep everything classes are a bit faster. Also, IDs are more for targeting stuff with JavaScript than with CSS. So I know that this is a CSS only thing,
Okay.
so I'm going to keep it a class. So that's why.
Cool. Thank you.
And that's just me kind of keeping things separate in my own head, kind of keeping a bit more organized. Because when we get to JavaScript next week, we'll be targeting things based on ID, tag, and class name. Should sound familiar, that's how we target stuff in CSS. So now it's how do we keep those things kind of separate and clear and concise. Great question. You'll notice also page header is 2 words, right? This is our first kind of walk into naming conventions with our code. Each language has their own naming conventions. Naming conventions aren't hard, fast rules, or they're not technically enforced on any sort of level. They just make our code a bit more readable and a bit more easily and a bit more, clean, to be completely honest. In CSS, a good coding styling is something called, is to use hyphens between words. So page header, 2 words, right? So page hyphen header.
And do you want to make, is there any rule that's like, or a suggestion that means that you should make a 2-word descriptor for your class?
Like
Or
why?
like if we just wanted to make it 1 word,
So I just want to make it header instead. You could.
but it's recommended to put like 2 words, right? for your
It's-
class.
Naming things is really hard. Like you'll find out, like, what do I call this variable? What do I call this class? So it's what's the best way to describe it. Header is great, but it might be too vague and too generic. Page header is a bit more specific, right? I know it's going to be the header for the whole page. I can get all that information just from that one class.
And so, and then you wouldn't want to be like page header of the first page that I wanted for this to be. That would be like too many.
That's a bit too specific.
Right.
So it's something between header and this is the header for my very first page. I'll make information page. Something between those 2 things is probably where it's at. Gavin, look at the answer.
Yeah, you're also gonna find different teams have different rules for this, right? So, there's going to be on your team a set of guides for how you decide the names of classes.
Mhm.
And there are, I use the word framework, but there are styles of
Guidelines?
naming things,
Yeah.
conventions, for not only how you name things, but the part of the names of things, that developers have kind of agreed upon, and this is a style that this team is going to follow, and you'll find that different teams will adopt some of those styles. And that takes away what Mark was saying, like naming things is hard, but when you have a convention to follow, you don't have to sit around and be like, what am I gonna call this, the page header of the first page? No, you look at your conventions and say, well, this is a header of a thing, and it's inside this component, which means the name is blah, 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 blah. Right? When you have rules to follow, it takes away some of the analysis paralysis, and you just follow the convention. And if everybody's following the same convention, then you can look at any class and know exactly what it is and how it's used.
Yep.
Yeah. So there are some conventions. We don't cover them in the class, but if you're interested, talk to one of us and we'll show you a couple examples of what that looks like.
Yeah. So I chose page header for, and I chose it to be a class. So I want this page header to be, see what do we have so far? It's right here on the left-hand side. So let's give it some margin. Let's kick it off the edges a little bit. And let's center the text like we did before. I want this to be big, bold, in the middle of the page. I also want to bump up the font size a little bit too. Because an H1 is just not good enough for me. It needs to be bigger. So I want to do text align center. I want to give it some margin of 1 rem. And I want to font size of 2 rems.
Were you gonna explain REMs or is it still later?
No, I'm going to do it now. Sorry, 2 rems. Let's make it 4 rems. So rems, what are rems? Rems are cool. Rems are awesome. Rems are amazing. So a rem is called a relative n. Doesn't really help us much. What is a relative n? Let's break it down. An m, an em, that is a modern size that we use in a lot of browsers, in modern websites, because that's the size of 1 m. 1 letter m. Inside of those fonts. So it's like, hey, 1 character gives the size of 1 m. And why we like it is that as we zoom in, change resolutions, change screen sizes, it all grows with it. So what this is saying is that my margin is the size of 1 letter m. So it's 1 character. No matter if I zoom in the screen, zoom out the screen, switch resolutions, go vertical or flipped, decimal, no matter what the size of your m is, that's the size that it's going to be.
So it's good because to do it like that because it's dynamic and
Yes.
contrast to doing like with pixels are not gonna, that's gonna be a hard measurement.
Pixels are a more static, fixed length. It's not relative to whatever font size you're on right now or anything like that. It's just straight up, well, you're saying that my margin is 10 pixels. My margin is always going to be 10 pixels no matter what. So that relative, the RM, because there's something called M, just EM. That RM, that relative M, goes back to this thing up here. Yep. So it's like we're saying, hey, our font to start off the page, 16 pixels. So that's the size of one rep. So no matter now where I am, it's always going back to that 16 to calculate everything else.
So that initial 16 pixels, is that just for your header one and then it'll extrapolate the rest of them from there?
So that colon root is for the entire page. But yeah, our headers now are getting a font size of 4 reps. So it's going to look at whatever our root value is for our font, our 16 pixels, and go, hey, now our header is now 4 times 16 pixels, whatever that is. 30, 64, yeah. Oh, I should know that. 64 pixels big. It should be that big. And as soon as our font size changes like that, it's going to change everything else on the page. So it's really good for the responsive world that we live in today.
Do you ever use pixels?
I use pixels for debugging borders, and that's it.
Okay. And you also would use pixels for things that are measured in pixels, like images.
Mhm.
So if the thing is measured in pixels, use pixels, but pretty much otherwise use some form of relative size. So you're going to use percentages, or rems, or percent of the view width, or percent of the view height. We want to be working in relative, because exactly what Mark was saying is that screen size has changed, and a pixel isn't necessarily a pixel. Right? Think about your super high definition phones, right? Where like it's a 5-inch wide phone, but it has like 4,000 pixels, right? 1 pixel your eye can't see. But when you start talking in terms of relative sizes, then it doesn't matter the dimensions of the page. It will work more nicely.
So for like a phone, what would a relative, it would be different than that screen, right?
Okay.
The RAM would be different size.
The rems wouldn't, but the pixels would be. So in this case, the font size pixels, like 1 inch is 72, right?
Okay.
Those are points, sorry. Yeah, so that 16 pixels is for the font, and then if we make everything else runs, we're just saying everything is relative to that.
Okay.
Because you'll find that when we have our design talk at some point, right, design for developers, you want there to be like a rhythm to the page. You want your spacing to be related to your font size, to your margins, all kind of have this ratio between them.
Yeah.
So if you change the base font size, you want everything else to kind of scale with it.
Right.
Whereas if everything were pixels, you'd have to run through the entire CSS file making those calculations, right? And you totally don't want to do that.
Right.
So we keep relative size for things that want to grow and shrink, and then pixels for things like images. Okay.
That looks slightly better.
Yeah.
So the one last thing I want to show you before we break and assign homework for the day is we want to change the font. This is a very straightforward font, very simplistic, easy to read, but it's not the best font in the world. There's a whole bunch of different font families, but there's also something called Google Fonts that allows us to import fonts as we'd like. So, Google Fonts. This is another resource that is free out there for us to use. And they're like, hey, if you want to use our fonts, do this stuff, and then you can use it. So I'm going to pick a really good font.
You do Lobster? I love
Lobster?
I think it's the Pinterest.
What were you going to pick?
Whew, that is one hell of a font. That's not what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting. Not that.
It's the same, it's the one I did in the pre-work in that.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So-
that photo app.
I'm going to
Yeah,
use
the
Lobster
Jasper app.
2 because it's a bit more readable, for me at least. So I'm going to select it. And then to use it, I'm going to add a link to their style sheet. And that's going to go inside of my head. So this is our first case of using a separate style sheet. We're going, hey, I have my style sheet, but I also have Google style sheet as well. And I'm going to include that first. I don't need that one anymore. And then I'm going to change the font family of just the page header. I can go, hey, you know what? Just my page header has a font family that. If I wanted to be a bit more expressive to my H1s, and I think I shall, I'll say, you know what? My theming and styling for the entire page, all of my H1s are going to have the Lobster 2 font.
Now that's saying Lobster 2 font, but if the user doesn't have Lobster 2, yes, it's going to be cursive, right?
Yep.
And if we don't know what cursive looks like, you're not going to read it at all.
Right. I mean, so with font family, you give it a comma-separated list, and each one is a fallback option. It's going, hey, do I have Lobster 2 somewhere? Oh, yes, no, yes, no, yes. Awesome, use it. No, if I don't have it, what's the next one? Is that one there? Yes, no, nope. Okay, go to the next one. So here I'm going, hey, use Lobster 2 from Google. If it's not there, use cursive. If I wanted to see what that looks like, just remove this for now. You go, hey, here's our fallback. Still good enough. If we're using a fallback, something else has gone wrong. And this is a term that's called a failing gracefully or degrading gracefully. It's if and when things go wrong, is my app busted or not?
Is this a way to tell that other things might have gone wrong? Like if
Nope.
you suddenly open a thing and you're in the wrong font?
If you know it as a developer, yeah. Like if you're like, oh wait, suddenly things don't look right, what's busted?
It's similar like when you do the image thing in HTML and you do alt, right? Because it just shows the font, like it doesn't show up.
Yeah. It's like, oh,
image,
something.
and then-
Yeah, there's no way for you to judge on the page, at least easily and reasonably, that your font doesn't load. There are ways, but not today. But like in general, like if you as a developer go, oh wait, my page looked like this fancy, not the other less fancy, something's wrong somewhere.
So like, you have to pretty much import the font you want to use unless it's like a common one that's known.
So you see those, like some companies have their own custom fonts, like I'm sure Pinterest does. Looks a lot like Lobster, but it's not Lobster probably. It's probably like Pinterest Lobster or something like that. They have their own font that's hosted on their servers going, hey, here's our branding style for here's what we want our stuff to look like.
Where do you find the list of what's like universally everybody has it, and then like is there a default list that you can just like so you know you can just name?
I mean, Comic Sans is cool. It's not the worst.
It's no Lobster too.
It's no Lobster too. I can tell you that. So I was hoping that MDN would have one.
But doing it through Google is pretty much safer if everyone uses Google the most, right?
I like to use Google because I trust them as a company to be up. I mean, if Google's down, something really bad is happening. And my font, my site's probably least of my concerns. But it's a very trusted source to use. I could link to any other service out there. I could link to Pinterest, steal their fonts. I could link to joesawesomefonts.com. Do I trust joesawesomefonts.com to be up all the time?
I don't know. Joe has his own computer that he has on a really slow connection.
And it is awesome. So
If I'm in Bing, then it's not gonna work.
what?
If I'm in Bing, or
No, it'll still work in Bing.
okay,
No matter what browser you're in, no matter what engine you're on.
Because it knows where to look for the font.
Yes, because it's always going back to Google servers to get the font.
if you're in China, then
Yep.
like Google.
I don't know.
Okay.
They
If
might
Google's
block you.
blocked, that's the trade-off of using an external service. Is that I have to rely on Google to be there for me to actually be successful.
What is the safest?
It's a pretty safe bet. So, here's where we are. We got pretty far in our style. Hope we understand CSS a bit better. So for your first real homework assignment tonight, I know this is crazy. I want you to take your website that you built for us yesterday, our simple HTML pages, and I want you to style it to make it look like a bad 90s site. We all know what 90s sites look like, right?
Yes.
Really
Like
gaudy
MySpace.
text, white space, rainbow backgrounds,
Yeah.
flashing stuff. Go crazy with the CSS. I want you to do that for your homework tonight. I'll sign it out. Reminder, it's due, close the issue by midnight tonight. That's because, and here's why. Homework assignments are due at midnight only because I want you to come tomorrow well rested. And that's it. Because sometimes in the past we've had students go, I'm going to work on this till 4 a.m. in the morning and get it perfectly 100% done. They'll come in the next day dead tired. Or even worse, I'm lost and confused at 4 a.m. Now I'm dead tired the next day, so I can't ask questions. I'd rather you come tomorrow with questions and an incomplete homework, but well rested, than all that stuff and on no sleep. This is one of those like healthy work-life balances kind of things. So that being said, I'm not sitting on my laptop at midnight tonight going, uh-oh, they didn't turn in their homework, it's 12:01, late. I'm not doing that. So that's not a hard deadline, it's just a highly, highly encouraged deadline. So whenever you have it by midnight, just turn it in. So, feeling good? So for the rest of the day, we're going to break now for lunch. There's open lab from 1 until 3. At 3 o'clock, I will butt some chairs here. We're going to work on this page some more together. We're going to style it, add some styling, some CSS, some borders back. We're going to work more on this page. I want to get further. So from 3 to 4, we're back here doing more work. And then from 4 to 5, it's more open lab time. That sound good? Cool. Homework will be out by the end of lunch.
That means they